Okay. We'll just wait for a few minutes and then we will, or a few seconds, and then we will get started. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the battle against AI-driven identity fraud. My name is Pinar Alpay. I'm Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Signicat, and today we'll delve into the escalating threat of AI-driven identity fraud and discuss the strategies to counter these sophisticated attacks. Please feel free to submit your questions via the chat. David and I will address them during our Q&A session at the end. But before we get started, I would love to introduce David Birch. We are extremely honored to have him with us, the global ambassador of Consult Hyperion, who is the leading authority in digital identity and digital financial services. He's a world-class keynote speaker, published author, Forbes contributor, and international board-level advisor on digital financial services. He's also recognized as a leading authority in digital identity and digital money. David's insights have been celebrated by Wired Magazine, Financial Brand, and PR Daily. So welcome, David. We're very happy to have you on our webinar.
Thank you for that very kind invitation, Pina. I don't deserve it, but thank you very much.
Of course, you are being very humble. But let's get started. On AI-driven identity fraud is a really hot topic these days. Within a little more than a year, AI has really transformed how we think about the digital economy, accelerating us towards a future with unthinkable levels of automation. AI has already started to bring a lot of efficiency gains to all parts of the economy. But it also presents new threats to us as bad actors learn how to use the technology for their criminal purposes. And this technology becomes available for free and legal and at scale. So before we launch into the results of the study and the insights that we gain from that, I'd like to ask you a few questions, David.
Sure.
What key developments are you observing in the market on AI-driven identity fraud?
Well, I think there are sort of three key areas to focus on. Actually, three key areas I think to be a little bit scared about. So one is the sheer scale. AI enables scale attacks. So and I think we all understand how easy it is now for even relatively unsophisticated attackers to use AI tools to generate very sophisticated attacks. These are networked, and obviously, one of the sort of important factors about the people that are launching these large-scale attacks is they're part of networks. So tools and techniques spread very quickly. So the first problem is just sheer scale, and it becomes very overwhelming because for a normal person, I count myself as a normal person in this respect, the ability to distinguish the real from the fake is vanishing. I mean, I consider myself, a reasonably sophisticated user of the internet and financial services. I get emails every day that I have to look at 3 or 4 times to try and figure out what they're real. In fact, and it's a silly example, but I have a text message on my phone from the utility company saying that there's a problem with my smart meters. I mean, smart. But there's a thing from the utility company saying there's a problem with my smart meter. Click on this link to make an appointment for an engineer to come around. And I could not tell whether that was real or not. I looked it up and down. The number it comes from is a text message short code. Even before you get into voice cloning and videos and just the sheer scale is because there's millions of these text messages going out all the time, and all the WhatsApp thing. Hello, mum, I lost my phone, and whatever.
Yeah.
So the scale is one obvious problem that AI has brought us. And of course, the number of people who can use these tools is escalating. I can't remember when I read it. I read a report a couple of days ago about the extent to which deepfake pornography, which is a huge problem in some schools and colleges. And of course, that's educating a whole generation of people in how to make these fakes and how to. So there's a scale problem. The second thing is there's a scope problem. In other words, using AI, you can attack in different ways. You have different attack vectors. You have different opportunities to make attacks. It's no longer, text messages and.
Yeah, the sheer size of the increasing attack surface, right? It's incredible.
And so now, and we're all familiar with there's the famous cases, the company that wired $25 million because a fake video CEO told them in a meeting to do it. And we've heard examples of a lot of voice faking that's going on at the moment because, and I don't know if you've played with any of those tools, but you just upload one sample of your voice and you can make a completely convincing, especially over a phone bandwidth. I mean, the video stuff has the headlines and it's most scary, but it's as you called it, the attack surface. It's the extent of that surface that AI enables, which is, everything from, just a memo in the wrong place to the finance department, a small change in the instructions on a house purchase, kind of things. So there's a scale problem and there's a scope problem. But I think there's also a psychological problem, which is very difficult to overcome. And the psychological problem is we all think that we're too smart to get caught out by these things. So as individuals, our defenses are not exactly optimized against this sort of thing. And I've spoken, it's funny really, Pinar, because I got very interested in deepfakes because I was very kindly asked if I would become an advisor to the Deepfake Summit, which is going to take place in America next year. And so because I agreed to do that, I started to do more research into how the trends were changing in that area. Sort of thing. So, and one thing I noticed, and actually talking to a couple of people who've had some unfortunate experiences around this as well, there is this factor that we don't think we'll get caught. So when the deep fake comes along, you think it's going to catch other people. You don't think it's going to catch you. The voice calls you and tells you that there's a problem with your account. This is Barclays, please press 1. A video tells you, oh, hi, this is your personal wealth advisor or something, or Elon Musk telling you to do something. I mean, whatever people get fooled by. One of the banks that I was working with in Australia, one of the guys there told, I was making some points about some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. What are the actual sort of technical steps that we can put in place? And he said, well, look, there's a limit to where you're going to get with this, because we've got customers who are convinced that they're in a secret relationship with Harry Styles. So if you think, no, but you see what I mean? There's a psychological problem as well. So
yeah, but that's also very in line with some of the findings that we have from our research.
Exactly.
75% of respondents believe that deepfakes will never be convincing enough to fool financial institutions.
Exactly. And so that's why I say, so there's the problems we kind of understand from our own business modeling. And I know some of the work that you and we have been doing, and that gives us the scale and scope. But there's this extra factor about psychology where I think, we may need to bring in some different kinds of expertise to help us deal with that. So long answer, but those are my
that's really sort of insightful, and it's actually quite in line with what we have found in the study. So without further ado, let's just dive into the Signicat's AI-driven identity fraud study. I would like to share with you some critical insights from our research that we conducted with Consult Hyperion. The results are rather striking and showing that we are at an inflection point. I'll talk about key takeaways from the study on how fraud, and especially identity fraud, and within that, AI-driven identity fraud has evolved, and how prepared the BSFI sector is, and what you can do to defend against it. And what I'm also going to share here is some snippets from Signicat's own data. As you know, we have many products fighting fraud in the identity space, and we're sitting on a lot of enlightening statistics. So let's talk about that. But first, I would like to share a little bit about Signicat for those who don't know us as well, or for those who know us for a particular type of product in the identity space. Signicat is a critical enabler of safe interactions in the digital world. I'm not going to go through everything on this slide, but we have a very strong product portfolio across the digital identity lifecycle, all the way from identity proofing, depending on whichever market in Europe and the use case, we have the identity proofing method to go with it. All the way from identity proofing to authentication to signatures, high level of assurance signatures, and the orchestration of that onboarding journey. Our clients are both B2B and B2C, so we are actually identifying both organizations and end users, and we focus on the high level of assurance use cases. And the other thing to note is that we solve complexity across the globe, with across Europe, with applicability across the globe, which makes us unique in the market. And the other thing I'd like to say is that on the right-hand side, we create concrete and impressive results and benefits for our customers. This is a study that's done by Forrester. They interviewed some of our biggest customers, and they found that they actually experience return on investment of more than 300% with a payback period of less than 6 months when they work with us. They also see 75% reduction in fraud costs, increases in conversion, 19 percentage points. So we are extremely proud of the impact that we create for our customers. But now on to the research. And I'd like to talk a little bit about our methodology. This is the first research of its kind on AI-driven identity fraud. As I said before, we conducted this with Consult Hyperion, and we worked with an independent research house, Census-wide. And we surveyed more than 1,200 fraud decision makers in 7 countries in Europe. And we focused on banks, insurance providers, payment providers, and fintech. And we collected these answers from March to April this year, 2024. Now, the first piece of data is a high-level statistics, and this is no surprise, right? Our respondents have said that they basically are experiencing an increase in fraud attempts of 80% over the last 3 years. If we dive a little bit further into it, identity fraud attempts were up 74%. And then going a little deeper into that, the AI-driven identity fraud, deepfakes within that were now 6.5% of all fraud attempts. And this data is actually coming from Signicat, and it's actually a more than 2,000% increase over the last 3 years. So it's a very significant increase that we are seeing in deepfakes. What about the economic impact of fraud, right? Our respondents have said that 38% of fraud-related revenue loss is now due to AI-driven fraud, which is also quite significant now. Now, let's start with some data on general identity fraud, and that is basically both digital and non-digital. We asked our respondents the most common types of fraud they encounter 3 years ago versus today. And most popular types of fraud have remained mostly the same over the last 3 years, with some slight changes. 3 years ago, top fraud types were card payment fraud, identity theft, and today account takeover is at the top, with card payment fraud at the second. The use of There's all sorts of malware and phishing, and these are actually sort of some methods to take over the accounts. Let's and you know, we sort of talked about you know, account takeover and also card payment fraud, and it's so easy now to take over accounts if they are using just simple passwords. AI especially is making stealing passwords and taking over accounts much easier. Let's now dive deeper into identity fraud. We sort of asked our respondents the most common types of identity fraud they encounter, and the sort of identity document forgery is at the top spot, and synthetic ID fraud is at the second spot. And what you see here is that deepfakes are actually rising into the third spot, which is really interesting. And one thing I want to say is that there's a lot of attention on consumer deepfake fraud, but it is just as common for B2B organizations. And that is one of the insights that we have seen in our study. And so it's something to take note. And there are some examples. So this is showing a few examples of how documents can be forged. Right, there are some websites out there that help you come up with, for example, utility bills or bank statements, or just basically a fake passport that you can purchase off the internet. So it's quite easy. In some websites, you upload a photo and you can generate a talking video of yourself as well. Now focusing more on EID frauds, right? EIDs are one of the sort of most common types of identification and authentication mechanisms, especially in the Nordics, in the Baltics, as well as the sort of Benelux. And EIDs are quite effective in preventing fraud, but from what we see in the study, they do not fully eradicate fraud. 60% of organizations stated that EID fraud is a bigger threat than 3 years ago. And over the last 3 years, deepfakes have become the most common threat using EID that is used in EID fraud. Interestingly, the study showed that Norway experienced the highest level of deepfakes attacks among the countries we surveyed. And we all know that in Norway, EID penetration is very high, and overall in the Nordics, and Norwegian Bank ID is a highly performing high-tech EID. But this shows that fraudsters are getting more sophisticated to counter the EIDs. So, you know, we can see that EIDs are slowing down, but not stopping it. And fraud decision makers need to understand that, you know, EIDs are a big part of the puzzle, but not the complete solution. Now, some data from Signicat. Signicat, as some of you know, Signicat electronic document and biometric identity verification product, Video ID, lets users scan identity documents using video streaming techniques and performs document forgery checks, as well as likeness and liveness checks using multiple machine learning models using using machine learning technology. And actually, our product was the first eIDV product certified for remote identity verification, and it has the same validity as face-to-face verification. And during the process, we perform multiple checks to detect impersonation, presence of deepfakes. So this data, it comes from our own statistics, from our Video ID product and our own real-world experience. And 3 years ago, deepfake attacks were just 0.1% of all fraud attempts that we caught. But today, it's around 6.5%, and that's 1 in every 15. And that presents a huge increase, more than 2,000% over the last 3 years. So it's something to absolutely take note. Yeah, and I'm going to show you some examples now, and this is an example of sort of a romance fraud from some sophisticated fraudsters. And here you see people using multiple cameras, multiple screens in order to fake their voice as well as their images to create identities, both for videos as well as normal conversations to fool people. This second video is coming from China, where people upload pictures, and then the software brings people to life. And as you can see, this can be quite a threat to companies, especially financial services, benefits fraud, pension fraud, etc. Can result from this, and it's very common and easy to do. There are sort of websites out there, completely legal, that allow you to create these images. Okay, well, now maybe some more data, and again, now focusing on AI-driven fraud, right? Coming back to our study. On average, respondents in our study estimated that 42.5% of detected fraud attempts now use AI, and 29% of them are considered successful. And 1 in 9 said that they estimated AI usage in fraud attempts to be as high as 70% for their organization. So this is, again, sort of quite significant numbers we're talking about. Another piece of data, again coming from Signicat, and what we see here is that we see a steady increase in the number of injection attacks versus presentation attacks, which are plateauing. To me, what this means, and maybe just a sort of little explanation on what I mean here. Presentation attacks include people wearing masks and makeups to spoof another person, but also where the camera films another screen showing a deep fake. Injection attacks are when malware or untrusted input is deliberately injected into a program, compromising its integrity or functionality. And injection attacks are considered more sophisticated. So we see the sort of sophistication of the deepfakes increasing in the last 3-4 years. Now, in our study, when of course, I was saying that we sort of surveyed different types of financial institutions, banks, fintechs, big companies in general. We have seen the biggest increases in AI-driven identity fraud over the last 3 years for banks, fintechs, and the large businesses. And these organizations are likely to have the best fraud prevention technology. So fraudsters are using more sophisticated techniques, and they're enjoying success with big companies as well. And I see we can discuss this later as well, but SMBs as well being victims. So this is a really sort of interesting fact, right? In the previous slide, I showed that 31% of banks are targeted with deepfake fraud attempts. Yet, according to the survey, 75% of respondents believe that deepfakes will never be convincing enough to fool financial institutions. And I find this a little bit shocking because for a fact we know that these most sophisticated of organizations are failing to recognize deepfakes. Just as an example, maybe some of you have already seen this news report earlier in the year where a finance worker gets a call from somebody claiming to be the chief financial officer, asking him to transfer $25 million to a certain bank account. And he doesn't believe it. He asks to be in a Teams call, and he's in a Teams call with 3 other people who were all deepfakes. And of course, he's fooled, and he transfers the money. So as David was saying earlier, the sophistication and the scale of the attacks is making it more difficult to identify the deepfakes, especially visually, without the use of sophisticated technology. And what's even more worrying for me is the fact that most of the fraud leaders surveyed, although they say that they have a team dedicated to the issue, they want to increase their budget, and they want to upgrade their technology, less than a quarter have already started implementation, and 3/4 of them say that they are going to be the timeline for them to implement AI-driven identity fraud measures is within 12 months. And that's a little bit worrying for me, because we have seen the scale of increase within the last year even, and given that we think that we are at an inflection point, I think in a year we will be in a totally different place with the scale and sophistication of these attacks. So I think the time is really running out. But when asked about, okay, how would you, like, what is standing in the way for you to tackle this with speed? There are a few reasons behind the lack of speed and maybe the lack of urgency. And that's probably going to be familiar with many of the people that are listening to this webinar. Lack of expertise, lack of time, lack of budget, and they simply do not know where to start. As Signicat, of course, someone as a company in the trenches in battling fraud, battling AI-driven fraud, we have a few tips for people who are asking, okay, where do I start? How do I tackle this? And we suggest four things. The first one is to use a multi-layered approach. And what this means is that there is no silver bullet, and companies need to use a combination of technologies and techniques and the risk-based approach to tackle AI-driven identity fraud. And what I mean by risk-based approach as well is that you want to make sure that you let the good actors through with minimal friction, but you also want to stop the bad actors and step up the security when you detect risk. That's what I mean by a risk-based, multi-layered approach, which includes sort of a combination of technologies that are going to tackle this. The second one is covering all vulnerable fronts. And here, our advice is to think about the interaction with your systems across the life cycle of the users, all the way from onboarding to authentication or safe logins, to doing more business with you through signatures or payment authorizations, and also keeping the information you have with the user current through user or organization through ongoing monitoring. The third one is to battle AI with AI. And what I mean with this is that as the fraudsters become more sophisticated, using Gen AI technologies to attack our systems, our consumers, we need to also employ these techniques and train our models with those types of Gen AI created images, videos, etc. And that means massive data analysis, pattern recognition, predictive analytics capabilities. So, for example, as Signicat, let's say we identify this website that allows you to put a picture in and that creates a video of yourself. We sort of then can sort of use these technologies to train our models so that our product doesn't fall victim to these types of attacks. And the last one is education, because people are, of course, the vulnerable points. Firstly, as David said, they feel very confident that they can recognize these threats, and secondly, of course, they sometimes are not all up to date with everything that's going on with technology. So organizations need to prepare employees and customers to cover these vulnerable points. So these are the sort of top 4 things, but I want to double click on the multi-layered approach and explain a little bit about what I mean by a multi-layered approach using Signicat's using Signicat's tools. So the first one is risk analysis, and an early risk analysis is extremely important to in a smart sequence to build a profile on the user for both at onboarding, but also for the user who wants to authorize a payment or authenticate themselves. And this could include things like velocity checks, geolocation, prior history, email profile, mobile number profile, device profile, and with behavioral data, and creating a risk scoring based on that, which then we can use to, as I said before, create a frictionless journey for safer users, but then create step-ups on the way for others. The second step is using robust automated user identity verification, either EIDs, of course, in conjunction with risk assessment, but also robust EIDVs in countries where there are no EIDs. For example, Signicat's video ID is one of those. The third one is in cases where it's needed to enrich data that we have collected through identity verification methods, EIDs or EIDV, with additional data lookups. And Signicat has a data verification hub with more than 200 data sources that are connected to it, with which we can look up any piece of data to verify it appropriate to the country and to the type of data. And once the customer has been onboarded, the next step in the process is when they come back, it's about secure logins for returning users. And here we can use EIDs, of course, but also, Signicat has a PSD2 compliance strong customer authentication product called Mobile ID, which has sort of very high levels of security in line with EIDAS regulations and PSD2, and helps authenticate biometrically the returning users. And of course, as the users want to make more business with you, and having trusted signatures is key. And here, a combination of identity verification and authentication methods, sort of like a smart combination of these, can create the trusted signatures that are required, either qualified or advanced electronic signatures. And also the auditing of these is possible with digital evidence management. And ongoing monitoring, of course, is key, because once you have onboarded a person, you need to make sure that the data you have on them or the organization, right, is current, and when you capture the changes. The one additional thing is, of course, these are all the tools that you have at your arsenal, but the smart combination of these tools is also key to ensure a smooth user experience that utilizes the right tool at the right time. And for that, there are multiple orchestration tool options that are available in Signicat's arsenal, all the way from a very sophisticated backend orchestration engine, which is RiskFlow from Signicat, which is capable of very advanced logic, or Signicat Mint, which is a front-end orchestration product that has access to all Signicat building blocks. It's a self-service product where you can drag and drop any Signicat building block and, for example, create a KYC journey, compliant KYC journey within 3-4 minutes, or if it's a little bit more complicated, a KYB journey within 2-3 hours. And then the sort of last one, of course, is instant KYC and instant KYB. These are off-the-shelf orchestration solutions that are compliant, that have been pre-built for a certain country or a use case. But this was a sort of like a whistle-stop tour of the multi-layered approach that Signicat has to preventing fraud, preventing identity fraud, and AI-driven identity fraud within that. And this was just high-level insights from our Battle Against AI-Driven Identity Fraud study. You can download the full report through this QR code. We will also send you the links after the webinar as well, so you don't need to download it right now if need be. But now I think it's time for our Q&A, and I'm looking at the questions that are coming from our audience as well. Let's look at the chat, and we can answer as many questions as we have time left now. But first, a question from me for David. David, as we saw earlier in our study, we saw that 74% of companies plan to have measures in place against AI-driven identity fraud within 12 months. Do you think this is good enough? And it's a leading question, but sorry.
No, but I'm slightly skeptical about this, because in the survey, you'd expect people to respond to say that they're going to do that. But as you pointed out yourself in your report, and obviously we are interested in that, in order to do that, you've got to start off with real risk analysis. And, as you know, we have a very structured risk analysis process, which we've used in a lot of different places. And I know it takes time to actually work out what the risks are and where the countermeasures should be. So even if you had an idea which countermeasures to use, you wouldn't know where to deploy them. So I'm skeptical about that. I think it takes a little bit longer. And I think you also have to prioritize. Until you've done the risk analysis, you won't know where to start with these things. So, and the other reason I'm slightly skeptical is, I'm not sure if it's the right thing to say, but in the report, they say they're going to do something about it, but they also said one of the key things they were going to do about it was to have stronger passwords, which is baffling to me. As you yourself pointed, passwords are you can't even call passwords security. You shouldn't be allowed to call them security. So I'm a little skeptical that they understand the magnitudes of the risk. I'm not sure they understand the complexity of dealing with those risks. And I'm not sure they understand the range of countermeasures yet. So I'm sorry to sound negative about it, but I'm a bit skeptical.
Okay. All right. Now let's look at the next question. Well, this seems again for you, David. The question says, with the rise of fraud and EID fraud, what specific steps can small to mid-sized businesses do to bolster their identity verification processes without overwhelming resources? To an extent, it's a little bit easier for big companies to allocate resources. What should the SMEs do?
Yeah, I've had a few conversations about this recently. Interestingly, with banks, because you would think, certainly in the SME sector, this would be the kind of service that a bank would provide to an SME. You're absolutely right. The guy that's running a small business with half a dozen people, he doesn't have the time or resources to deal with this sort of thing, and he's very ill-equipped to deal with some kind of deepfake attack anyway. So someone has to provide that service to him, and it could be independent companies. But how would he know how to choose? I don't know. You probably think I'm very old-fashioned about this, but I think it's a service that banks should be providing to those SMEs. not other people.
Yeah, true. I think the sort of technology providers, including banks and maybe sort of orchestrated solutions like we talked about, the off-the-shelf orchestrated solutions might be sort of ideal for SMEs.
I think so, but I think banks understand risk in a way that SMEs don't, and so the sort of pricing and the insurances that would go with that kind of thing, to me, I mean, obviously, I hope they'll use your technology to do it, but I think for a typical SME, it's really a bank that we should be providing this.
And you're saying maybe we should treat them like users, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, next question. Maybe I can take this one first. It says, will there at some point be a point where biometrics can no longer be relied upon because deepfakes cannot be detected? And what will be the alternative? And I'll just provide a few points from me, and then David, would love to get your opinion on this as well. Well, I mean, we saw in the data, and both Signicats and the survey, the increasing sophistication and of deepfakes, the AI-generated media. It's a threat to the reliability of biometric systems, of course, when you have these technologies that can mimic human characteristics better and better. But there are ways to defend against these, and there's, of course, behavioral biometrics, looking at micro expressions, how a sort of person handles itself. There are additional biometrics beyond surface, like iris, retinal scans, also multi-factor authentication, right? That's and more sophisticated anti-spoofing. There's cryptography. So there's a lot of technologies that can be used to detect deepfakes, and I'm sure there's going to be more coming up. But David, what do you think?
Well, I think in the report you said that your multi-layer approach is the right way forward. I don't think Signicat or anyone else was suggesting that biometrics would be the only defense.
Yeah.
And crucially, you talked about the trusted signatures, which I think everybody should be using those already, but for one reason or another they haven't penetrated. So I think ultimately you in this multi-layered approach you have ultimately, I mean, the digital signatures that have been around for many years, and they're the bits that can't be forged. So if they're part of the multi-layer approach, as you've set out in the report, I think that's quite an optimistic view of the future. So yes, I don't think anyone's suggesting only rely on biometrics. Absolutely. But I think we, as you've pointed out, we already have the technology that we need to make that multi-layer, that multi-level approach work. And that's the other things you were talking about. The digital signatures, the data enrichment and verification, the other things, we already have them. You already have them.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look at the next question there. And I think this question might be for you, David. The question is, vendors often claim their fraud solution is the best, but these claims are difficult to substantiate. How can you ensure you choose the right partner?
Well, that's easy. You just hire Consult Hyperion. That's an easy question to answer. If all the vendors' claims were completely true, 100% believable, we'd have nothing to do, and that's a very tragic vision of a future that none of us want to share. So, please be assured there are ways that you can measure, monitor. The fact we're sitting here with Signicat tells you that we've had some positive experiences with them.
Fantastic. Let me see.
You didn't say no advertising, so I thought that was okay.
Okay. Okay. There's a really good question here, which is interesting. Do you see EU digital identity wallet as a solution? Vision of EIDAS is to give people wallets to manage their credentials, of course. And what will be the fraud risks with those wallets? Having your identity and credentials in one place, is the digital identity wallet a solution? What do you think?
I think they're part of a solution, actually, and I think that for two reasons. So one is, obviously, if the EU digital identity wallet is going to be useful, if people are going to actually use it for serious things, it has to have very strong authentication. So essentially, if you've got to steal my phone and steal my fingerprint and steal my passcode, or whatever, then for most things, I mean, we're not launching nuclear missiles with this. For most things, that actually will give us the security that we need. So I'm kind of optimistic about that. But I'm optimistic about it for another reason, which is whether the EU digital identity wallet is successful or not. We now have thousands of people who know how to write software for digital wallets that use verifiable credentials, that shift the locus of transactions away from identification and more towards the authorization domain. We actually, and you as well, we want a situation where actually identity isn't part of transactions. The more places you have to share your identity, the more places it can be stolen from. What we want is to shift towards credentials. Yes. Not is this Dave Birch, but is this person over 18? Is this person a resident of the UK? Is this person a customer of Barclays? And things like this. So that mindset.
That's the necessary information provided, basically, nothing more. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm optimistic for two reasons. Yes, it might solve a lot of the problems if it works and becomes widely used. But even if it doesn't work, it's actually created an industry in Europe of people who know how to work with credentials and can implement those in other environments.
Yeah, great. I see another question here. How is AI implemented into fighting fraud on Signicat side, or is it in future roadmap? So it is already integrated and an integral part of our products at Signicat. So, for example, I talked about our video ID product, where machine learning technologies are deeply ingrained. We use multiple methods to identify any tampered documents, any sort of injection attacks or presentation attacks. We have multiple anti-spoofing models that identify fraud at that level. But of course, it's a sort of moving feast. As we see new attacks, as we see new developments, we have to stay a few steps ahead of the fraudsters and always improve our products. But yes, it is already being used. Great. I mean, I'm looking at the clock. I'm not sure whether we are up to the time. We are, right? So I think, let me see if there's a chance for us to get another question. Well, we have quite a lot of questions in the chat, so we will send, as with our email at the end of this, we will also be answering the questions that we weren't able to answer in this webinar. But yeah, I'm now going to conclude the webinar. Thank you so much for participating, and a big thank you, David, for your expertise and your insights. And thank you, everyone who attended. We'll be sharing a recording of this session along with additional resources, so keep an eye out for that. And feel free to download our solution guide and the full reports from the handouts, and reach out to us if you have any further questions. And thank you. Have a great day. And thanks, David, again.